Many language learners struggle to find time to consistently learn a new language because they try to add language learning into their life instead of integrating it into their life. You think it takes too long to learn a new language. You think you don't have enough time to learn a new language because you're trying to insert a 1 hour block of study time or a 5 hour block of study time into your already jam-packed schedule instead of immersing yourself into the language and into learning naturally throughout the day. So it's no wonder that you feel tired and exhausted when you try to fit and stuff your language learning at the end of the day after you're tired from work instead of learning when your brain is refreshed and energized. All of us start off passionate and excited to learn a new language, but eventually that passion slowly dies off as we stop seeing progress, as we start dreading learning and studying and repeating those repetitive and boring tasks, especially when we don't see much progress. The truth is, to learn effectively, our studies should fit our life, not the other way around. To learn fast, we should immerse ourselves in the language effortlessly without it consuming our lives. So if you're finding yourself constantly needing to mold your life and your schedule around your studies, around your learning, this is an uphill battle. You're doing it wrong. This is like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It's not going to fit, it's not going to work, and you're just going to burn yourself out. Just think about the best learners that we know of, babies. They have a near 100% success rate when it comes to learning languages. What can we learn from them? What we do know is that they don't schedule time to rigidly learn languages. They don't have an hour block here out of their day or a 4-hour block to study languages. Instead, they're constantly studying, constantly getting immersed in that environment 12 to 14 hours a day, constantly whenever they're awake. And even with all of this time exposed to the language, it still takes them years to speak fluently, to be confident, to learn the language. But for some reason, as adult learners, we've turned language learning into this rigid and cold exercise where we have to push through and grind through textbooks and memorize vocabulary lists and go through flashcards when this doesn't match with how we learn best. Okay, so how do you integrate language learning into your life then? To integrate language learning into your life effortlessly without it consuming your life, you need to understand how you are using your time and how not to waste your time. You should understand that in this modern age, with technology and with all these distractions, it's very, very difficult to stay focused on any particular task. It's not just language learning. There is a war against your time, to put it bluntly. Where people used to conquer and colonize foreign lands, now social media companies like TikTok and Instagram conquer and colonize every second of your time. Attention is the new land, and your attention is being robbed all throughout the day with your permission. So you need to understand that all of these social media apps, they're distractions. And if you don't believe me, try tracking how much time on your phone that you spend on social media apps like Instagram and TikTok, and you'd be surprised by all the hours that you spend, 3, 4, 5 hours a day just scrolling mindlessly. They've got you hooked on this addiction, this dopamine rush, and every time that you're scrolling, refreshing the page, you're getting that dopamine rush. It could be another video, another post that might spike your dopamine again, and then after that, your dopamine drops, and then you're craving for that excitement and that feeling again. Every time that you're waiting in line or feeling awkward and you just pull up your phone and scroll through social media, this could be time that could be used to learn your new language, to push yourselves, to forward yourselves closer towards your goal, to learn your dream language, and to change your life. Social media apps have also changed the way that we think drastically, almost brainwashing us. Everything has become a performance now. We need to present our best selves, or it's not worth sharing, or it's not even worth doing. Everything is glitter and gold, or so it seems. Instead of learning languages and using them in real life like we used to, or collecting vocabulary similar to how we record videos or collect pictures of a live event, of a live maybe performance, instead of actually being in the moment and missing out on the live experience. So while technology is amazing, while it's made our lives so much easier, while it's given us so many more opportunities and ways to learn things like never before, it's also introduced so many more distractions that make it ever so easier to stay superficial, to never dive deep, never stay focused. It's made it easier to chase these status symbols, like how much vocabulary you know or how many languages you know, so you claim that elite status of being a polyglot. We've forgotten the point of learning languages, which is to use the language as a tool for communication, for connection, and to build new relationships and experiences. It's certainly not your fault that these social media companies are prevalent, but now that you know it, it's your responsibility to notice the distractions for what they are, to not fall for the traps, and to start taking control of your time, to not let these invisible hands rob your time away and also brainwash you into thinking that everything needs to be a performance, everything needs to be perfect and shiny and glittery. If you don't take control of your time, someone else will. Some other creator, some other social media app is going to choose for you. And let me tell you, they don't have your best interest at hand. They just want you to keep consuming, keep giving them your attention, which is very valuable to you. Okay, great. We know that we need to reduce our distractions. What's next? Number 2, the next step is to reduce friction. Friction kills your momentum, like speed bumps on the road. Think about it like this. When you're skating on ice, there's very little friction, so you keep going very quickly with very little effort. But when you try to skate on concrete, there's a lot of friction. You barely move an inch, and you have to try very hard to move further and further. This is friction. Momentum is when you feel excited, when you feel passionate. Think of when you first started to learn a new language. Everything was exciting. There were so many possibilities. The best thing that you can do when you have momentum is to keep it going. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And then the opposite, notice when you lose momentum. Notice the things that take your momentum away, that make you dread learning or studying, things that make you bored or procrastinate. These are things that kill your momentum, and these are things that are what we call friction. Identify the areas that cause the most friction for you. They are different for everyone. The common ones that I see are time friction, decision friction, fatigue friction, and performance friction. Number 1, reduce time friction. Time friction occurs when you have to create extra time throughout the day to study. So scheduling a 1-hour time block in your busy day is going to cause some friction. Scheduling 4 hours out of your busy day is going to cause even more friction. Ideally, the best thing is to be able to study or to be able to learn without creating any extra new time to study. But this is not very realistic. What is realistic is being able to transform the time that you already have, the inefficient time that you have, into effective time, into productive time for learning. And the way that we can do this is to think about the dead time that we have throughout the day. So all the time that we spend commuting, traveling, doing chores, even exercising, doing work, menial tasks. These are all times when we don't have to really mentally be active. We don't have to really be processing a lot. We don't have to use a lot of RAM. We can transform this time from dead time, unproductive time, into time that we can use to learn our language, to further ourselves towards our goals. So instead of distracting ourselves like most people do with social media, scrolling through Instagram or Reels, we can use this time to our advantage without the need to create extra time, without the need to schedule extra time to study, which causes a lot of friction. So this is how we can start to think about immersing ourselves throughout our day with the language, with our target language, without actually having it overwhelm our lives. Just like babies are immersed in a language 24/7, always throughout the day. This way, studying and learning become a natural part of your life as you go about your daily activities, and it just feels like a regular part of your life. Okay, so how do you do this practically? The easiest thing, especially for beginners, and the thing that I did very early on when I started learning Mandarin Chinese, and the thing that caused a sudden sharp increase in my listening comprehension and my speaking ability and my pronunciation, was to start listening to podcasts all throughout the day whenever I had these dead periods. Whenever I was commuting, when I was traveling, riding my bike, exercising, doing chores, washing the dishes, exercising, even doing menial tasks on the computer, even working. All of this time accounts for almost hours throughout the day. All of this time I was immersing myself into the language, listening to native podcasts all throughout the day on repetition. You might be thinking, okay, great, I'm a beginner. How am I going to listen to native podcasts? I'm not going to understand everything. Yes and no. So in language learning, there's this thing called comprehensible input. Comprehensible input is very good. You want to listen to material, or you want to learn from material that is slightly above your level. And so you still understand most of the things, maybe like 80% of your target language, but there's still maybe like 20% that you don't understand. Ideally, that's the target. Realistically, as a beginner, this severely limits the type of content that you can consume. So a lot of this content that is comprehensible, as a beginner, there's not a lot, and most of it is fairly dry, textbook-like material, and it's not very interesting. It's fairly boring. So this is where I think the power of incomprehensible input comes in. And I've spoken about this before. Things like native podcasts would be considered incomprehensible input. Things that are made for native speakers that are harder to understand and comprehend, but are much more interesting, and the selection is way more varied. You have so many more options to choose from. And the benefit of this is, even though you don't understand, you can still naturally absorb the language. You can absorb the sounds of the language, especially as a beginner. You can start to understand the nuances of tones in the pronunciation. You can start distinguishing, like I did during this period, when even like a sentence starts, when it stops. All of these things are harder to track, and you can't, capture or record, like how many vocabulary words you know. But this general sense of the language is extremely important. And I would say it directly translates to your level of understanding, your comprehension, and your ability to think in the language, as a lot of people aspire to do. I mean, just think about babies again. They're constantly immersed in the perfect language environment, and especially as babies, they don't understand everything. They don't have all the vocabulary, but still they're absorbing all the language, the sounds of the language, and over time, this certainly, I believe, helps them to build up that repertoire, the ability to distinguish sounds, the ability to eventually produce those sounds later on. So my recommendation is to have a combination of comprehensible and incomprehensible input, but at the end of the day, the important thing is to utilize your dead time to listen to your favorite material, incomprehensible or comprehensible input, so that you don't have to create extra time throughout your day that causes friction. Number 2 is to reduce content friction. So content friction is when we don't enjoy the content we're studying, so we dread studying and give up. The solution is dead simple. Stop listening to what others tell you should study and start learning from the content that you enjoy. When you start learning from content that you enjoy, you'll naturally have motivation and momentum build up, even when no one's looking, even when your grade doesn't depend on it, even when the outcome doesn't depend on it. So this is the Goldilocks zone that you want to be in, where learning is just natural, it flows naturally, and it's the most optimal. So this also means that learning is highly personable. So there's no one-size-fits-all plan or medium or content or resource. You have to test everything and try it for yourself and see what works for you. Some people like studying from textbooks. Some people like flashcards. Some people like learning from videos, from podcasts, from TV shows, from books to manga. There are so many resources. There are so many topics. You have to find the right one for you. Focus on content that you would consume in English, in your normal daily language, in your mother tongue. So if you would normally listen to content on philosophy, on psychology, on relationships, on self-help, on business, any topic you want, there is the equivalent in your target language. You're not going to understand everything, but the momentum and the motivation and the interest and the excitement that you have for that particular topic is going to transfer. And so you're going to be way more willing to overcome those phases when you don't understand. You're going to be more interested in looking up certain words. If you try to learn everything all at once, if you try to learn all the topics all at once, you're going to spread yourself thin and you're going to only learn superficially. But if you pick a topic, if you dig deep into the rabbit hole of one particular topic and then learn it deeply, learn the ins and outs of that particular topic, especially in one that you're very interested in, you're going to build what I call local confidence. This local confidence is going to transfer into that next topic that you learn, so on and so forth. Gradually, this is going to build your overall confidence. So there's no one-size-fits-all topic that everyone should learn. You are that topic. Your interests, your personality is that topic, and you should explore from there. Don't try to fit your learning into a particular resource or textbook. Instead, your learning material should fit your interests and your lifestyle and your life. And now that we have the internet with all of the new resources and all of the possibilities, it's never been easier to find a TV show, a podcast that covers your interests. So you should be able to design your personalized curriculum based on your specific interests. Number 3, reduce fatigue friction. Fatigue friction is when you feel the urge to procrastinate because you are tired, because you've left studying to the end of the day when you're exhausted. If learning a new language is truly important to you, then don't leave it to the end of the day when you're exhausted, when you're fatigued, after a busy day at work. Don't just see what happens. You know what will happen. This happens time and time again. If learning a new language is a priority for you, then treat it as a priority. Study or learn that language when you feel energized, when you feel refreshed, certainly not at the end of the day. This could mean learning throughout dead times, like we mentioned before, throughout the day when you're energized, energized when you're walking, exercising, or this could mean learning at the beginning of the day when you have a lot of energy before you're depleted from your work and feel exhausted. Number 4, reduce performance friction. Performance friction is when we equate learning to being a performance, stopping ourselves from even trying because we don't want to make a mistake. Again, this is the social media hive mind brainwashing us again. We think that everything needs to be a performance, everything needs to be perfect, everything needs to be spotless, but in reality, this is not the case. Reality is not perfect. Reality is not polished. Reality is often full of mistakes. Reality is the 99% that most people don't see, that doesn't make it to the polished reel or the Instagram post that makes it to social media. So this means stop overthinking language learning and whether you're going to make a mistake or not. Yes, you will make a mistake. Will people care? Probably not. Stop treating language learning like you're collecting vocabulary for future use, like we record videos and collect pictures while missing the live experience. Language at its core is a tool for communication, connection, and building relationships. And if communication is the goal, then collecting and accumulating more vocabulary is the wrong metric. You can communicate effectively with a small amount of vocabulary, and you can also communicate very poorly with a large amount of vocabulary. The number of vocabulary that you know is a lag indicator, meaning that it doesn't directly translate to comprehension or speaking in real conversations. The way you do that is to focus on listening and speaking. And when you do that, your speaking will naturally improve, your listening will naturally improve, and the number of vocabulary that you know will naturally improve. So when learners tell me that they're afraid of speaking, they don't have a lot of confidence, where this really comes from, where this stems from, is a fear of performance. They're treating speaking like a performance, so they're afraid to make mistakes because they think people will judge them. No one is afraid of speaking with their best friend about a topic that they're passionate about, that they're excited to talk about, because in this situation, you're not performing, you're just being yourself. Yes, when you speak in a foreign language, you're going to make mistakes. You may look silly, but what's the alternative? Not to speak at all? How far is that going to get you? Not very far at all, because you build confidence from competence. So you build it from doing, from trial and error, from making mistakes. The more mistakes you make, the closer you are to your goal and the easier learning becomes. So you just have to get over that mental hurdle. It really is in your mind. You have to lower your standards, eliminate that need for perfection. A lot of us have that, especially me, and I had to just eliminate it. Make mistakes, laugh it off, treat it as a game, and eventually it gets easier. Okay, so what is my daily routine? Number 1, the first thing that I do is I wake up early in the morning, and I understand that this is the time when I'm most energized, when I'm most refreshed, and so I strategically use this time to prime my mind for learning a language, for learning Mandarin Chinese. And so usually I'll go out and I'll go for a walk, and during this time I'll put on a Chinese podcast and I'll listen to it passively or actively, and I'll prime my mind, and I'll be thinking and paying attention for any new words that I want to focus on, or if there are any new words from the previous day that I want to dive deeper into. While I'm listening, I'm shadowing. I've spoken about this technique before. It's very powerful. It's called the shadowing technique, and basically it's mimicking or copying what the speaker says. And this also primes my brain. It helps me warm up my mouth muscles, and it also helps me to consolidate what I'm learning, and it helps me to practice my speaking and pronunciation. I usually spend 15 to 20 minutes walking and listening in the beginning of the day. And while I'm doing this, number 2, I'm also thinking about one word that I can learn deeply. Again, my goal is one word only. It's very low. I set the bar low. A lot of people, they set the bar too high, and so they overwhelm themselves. While I'm listening and I'm shadowing, I'm thinking about that one word that I can learn deeply, that I can look up and look at example sentences, and that I can start applying immediately. Although I set only one word as my goal, oftentimes I'm going to learn more than one word, but because I set the bar low, I'm not defeated when I don't learn more than one word. Again, this whole process is still while I'm walking and listening. Number 3, once I've found that word and I've looked it up, I've looked at example sentences on Pleco, I'm starting to think about how I can apply that word immediately. I'm looking at my surroundings. I'm paying attention to how I can start using it, and I'm priming myself because I know that when I can start applying and outputting and using this word in a sentence, that's going to inch me closer to being able to use it in conversations with other people. This step is very important because I know that listening is great. It's going going to give me the vocabulary passively, but if I want to start using it actively, I have to actually use it. I have to make mistakes. I have to apply it. I have to output and actually speak it out. So I set a timer. My goal is to speak for 1 minute, and this could be me repeating the word. It could be me repeating the phrase that the word was in when I first heard it in the podcast, or it could be me using it in different sentences, often wrong, often making mistakes, but it doesn't matter. I'm just trying to speak it, and I don't have to make any sense. I just have to try to use it and speak for at least 1 minute, and oftentimes I'm speaking more than 1 minute. But again, I'm setting the bar low so that if I don't speak more than 1 minute, that's fine, but oftentimes I do, and I'm speaking for more than 1 minute, and I enjoy it, but I can just cap it off at 1 minute if I'm busy, if I have other things to do. And while I'm doing this, I'm still walking, I'm still making lots of mistakes. Again, the point of this is not perfection. The point of this is consistency. It's the process. It's building a habit that I can see myself doing consistently every day, even if I'm busy. All of this happens within 15 to 20 minutes during my walk, and when this finishes, I go back home and I continue on with my day. Number 4, the final thing that I do for my language learning throughout the day is to passively listen to podcasts, usually throughout the day. And this marks a transition to how I'm learning throughout the day, because in the beginning, the first 15 to 20 minutes, I'm actively engaged, and that's how much I spend actively engaged in the language. But for the rest of the day, I'm passively immersing myself, similar to how babies passively immerse themselves into language. And so during this period, I'm not overly concerned with how much I'm paying attention, because I know that even though I'm passively engaged and I may miss words here and there, I may not be paying attention 100%, I'm still probably picking up a lot unconsciously, subconsciously, while listening, while doing other things. So whenever I have dead time, while I'm walking, while I'm commuting, while I'm traveling, exercising, walking to get lunch, exercising, doing work, I'm putting on podcasts and I'm just listening throughout the day while I'm doing other things. And because I know that I don't enjoy reviewing flashcards and looking at vocabulary lists, this acts to help consolidate my knowledge. It acts as spaced repetition. So instead of going through flashcards, looking at vocabulary lists, I'm just hearing the words over and over again in context in a podcast that I find interesting. So even if I'm not paying attention completely, I'm still absorbing that pronunciation. And as much as I can, I'm trying to pay attention. I'm trying to mimic. I'm trying to shadow. And over the course of my day, this accumulates. This adds up to hours of time that I'm naturally absorbing the language. Way more time than I would have been able to set aside, the same amount of time to study, to actively study a language. Because if you think about it, I'm only actively studying for maybe 15 to 20 minutes a day, but I'm passively studying unconsciously, effortlessly for 1 to 4 hours every day. So this is the approach that I use to help me learn Mandarin Chinese, to help me get conversational and beyond very quickly. Hopefully this helps you in your language learning journey, and check out the copy paste speak system to learn the method that I use to start speaking Mandarin Chinese like native speakers. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time. Bye.